Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, I'm lucky. I just got back. I'm still a little jet lagged. I got invited to Central Europe to sample the deer and pheasant hunting. And I gotta say, it's a lot different. A couple of times I found myself saying, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. So I called up Roy Huntington, who has hunted fairly extensively in Africa, and we talk about how hunting is so much different any place other than the United States. So let's talk to Roy Huntington about hunting overseas. Idly ho there, Roy.
Idly ho. I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, well, I was a big Simpsons fan back when it was funny, when the first 10 seasons. But I think I did that once for we were recording Gun Cranks, and I used Ned Flanders' "Idly ho, neighbors," and you guys kind of were like, "What in the world?" Anyway,
I'm going to tell you now, though, you're talking to someone who has never watched a single episode of The Simpsons.
Okay,
not because I don't want to be politically incorrect, but I just never did.
Yep. Well, the early ones were funny, and then they got woke, and it's not funny anymore. So anyway, let's talk about something. And I was actually gone the last 2 weeks, and I had to put on my big boy pants and grab my passport. I got to go to Europe, and I got to go hunting, and it was, oh my goodness, so much different than what I'm used to. So that's why I thought it'd be fun, Roy, to call you up and have a little chat about some of the things that are a little bit different than, like I said, the opening day of deer season here in downtown Indiana. We go down to Greasy Gert's Grub and Gas, and, we all meet at 5 and have a plate of eggs and hash browns, and that's not how they do it overseas. So we're going to talk about that.
No.
So
cool.
You've not hunted in Europe. I've not hunted in Africa yet. So we can compare and contrast the different experiences. So
we'll balance it out.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I could probably talk this entire episode by myself of all the differences I've noticed. It was eye-opening, and I expected it to be, but it was even more so. So I'll pitch that back to you. When you were in Africa and getting ready to actually, when you found yourself going, I'm actually hunting in Africa, what were your overall impressions?
Very different from here, like you say. They take it all very seriously. They have a good sense of humor, but they're there to hunt.
Yep.
And there's no grab ass, and there's no, you show up there and you should be dressed appropriately, which there is usually khakis and, green and not camo like we have here. Yeah. Because it's actually illegal in a lot of the countries down there to wear camo. And it's not really a gun culture so much as it's a hunting culture. And
exactly.
So, the guns are simply tools to go hunting. And they're also very safe. I mean, there's a good deal of attention given to, these are the rules, this is when you load the gun, this is when you don't load the gun. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of the PHs down there. If you have a bolt action, rifle, is that you carry it with a unchambered, an empty chamber. When he tells you to chamber around like you're going to shoot something now, you chamber around, but they want you to keep the bolt handle up.
Right.
So the gun can't shoot, safety or not.
Yeah.
And then, as one told me, he said, then I can look at a glance and tell if you're safe or not. And I thought that's right. Actually, I have adopted that when I'm teaching somebody now. If it's a bolt gun, keep the handle out, And so then when it's time to shoot, it's time to shoot. It's not time to adjust your pack or look through the binoculars or fix your hat or take a drink of water. I just was sort of always impressed with the professionalism.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of respect for the game.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you noticed that in Europe. And like you say, well, they summed it up best. They said Americans are either very, for lack of a better term, I'll say very well behaved. They dress appropriately, they have good equipment, they listen to the instructions, they shoot well, or they're 100% in the opposite direction.
Oh, my.
They're unprepared, they have bad guns, they didn't zero them, all the wrong clothes, they're kind of boorish idiots, they drink too much at night in camp, that kind of stuff. And I think because we don't have that discipline here in the States, and you'll attest to this, is that, in Europe, you don't just get your gun and go hunting.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, most of the European countries, and you can talk about this, is that you have to actually take a shooting test, and there's really rules. So that's just some initial thoughts, I'm very envious. I saw the pictures. I hope you should probably post some of the pictures in this somehow. Yeah,
I will.
And I'm just anxious to hear about it. So.
Well, I think you hit all the points that I was going to hit, which is interesting because, we're talking a continent and a lifestyle that is totally different, but the relationship to the game, as you said, they have a deep respect for the game. And I will say from my standpoint of, I've written about hunting and I've taken hunting, a lot of hunting trips over the years for a lot of different things. But over there, and apparently in Africa too, talking to I've got many, many friends that have been there, is the game is not necessarily owned by the people. It's owned by somebody, and it's managed that way. And like you said, you don't just go get your rifle and go hunting, because it would be no different than like going out back and shooting the guy's cat. It's kind of that way. So, just the opportunities and the way they look at it is very controlled. It's very organized. It's very disciplined. And but really, truly, for me, the big takeaway was the reverence for the game. That I know a lot of U.S. hunters, and they're very reverent about what they do, but not all of them, or not even the majority of them.
I think we have to remember too that it was Europeans, white hunters who went to Africa.
Yeah.
And so the European tradition sort of translated to there, but have changed, of course, over the last 200 years. But I think in Europe especially, they have, thousands of years of tradition, and, hundreds of years of hunting in the woods, of Germany, and things like that. And so there really is, if this, then that. In other words, this is how you do it here.
Yeah.
Or you don't do it.
Yep. Well, I'll walk through my first hunt, and it was. There's so many words I can use. I'll just explain how it happened. So we get outfitted, and like you said, no camouflage. A few people had it, but for the most part, they want wool, and green is very traditional. Some guys were wearing the shooting jackets with the tie, the vest, the whole 9 yards. I don't have an outfit like that, so I didn't, but I did buy a nice heavy green wool coat, and had earth tone pants on. So we were getting ready to hunt. It started out, before dawn. We had breakfast, and breakfast over there. Oh my goodness. But I will say, I didn't mention it. I went to the Czech Republic, and the food, not my favorite food. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying for me personally, I didn't care for it. But if I never see another bowl of goulash in my life, I'll be doing fine. But anyway, we had breakfast and all the interesting stuff you have over there. So then they call us out into kind of the courtyard of this mansion, and there is a rectangle laid out with spruce boughs that they had trimmed. And there's it's a rectangle, and on the long sides there's an opening right in the middle on one side and one on the other. So we're instructed to stand in a line along one side, and then the people that are going to help, the helpers, the beaters, there's a whole bunch of folks involved. They stand on the other side. On this end is the hunt master and the host. And then on this end is a guy with a round horn, kind of looks like a French horn with no valve. And we're kind of standing there. I'm thinking, okay, this is something. And they've got fires burning at the four corners. And I thought, okay, this is cool. So on some signal that I didn't see, everybody took their hat off, held it over their heart, and this guy played a tune basically. And he did a great job. And then he sang something in Czech that I don't have the slightest clue as to what it meant. But then he played some more, and then he turned it over to the guys that were in charge. They talked about welcome, and they talked about safety and what we were there to do, which was that day it was a management hunt. Their gamekeeper on that preserve had decided they needed to cull 50 animals. So they have fallow deer, red stag, and a few other things. But our mission was to take 50 red stag and fallow does, yearlings, and spike bucks. And so that's what we were supposed to do, and they explained all that. And then they went back to the bugle guy, and he bugled some more and said some more words and finished, and then off we went. So it was interesting. I filmed it, and I'll share that, but it was interesting to see. I had no clue as to what was going on, but you could tell they were very reverent about what was getting ready to happen. This was serious business. This, as you said, that was perfect. There was no grab-assing involved. And that's the moment when I thought, the boys down at the Greasy Spoon, it'd be interesting to see how some of them would take this, because they would recognize that they're very reverent about this and they're very serious. And the interesting thing, too, is the Czech Republic, I heard this several times, they're one of the least religious European countries for many historical reasons. But boy, they know their ritual, and they're very reverent about the hunting part of it.
Well, something I think American hunters forget is that, first of all, the countries are really small there.
Yeah.
And the hunting land is very limited.
Yep.
And so it's a real privilege to hunt. I mean, to shoot a deer, the fact that you shot that many deer, that's astounding to me. But to actually go and shoot a red deer or fallow deer or pheasants or something like that, you have to pay the taxes and buy the licenses and prove competency with your gun and know the place to hunt and join the club and and so you don't just say, Bill, grab your rifle, we're going to go deer hunting this weekend.
Back in the day, 400 or 500 years ago, if you did that without the express invitation of the king or the baron, your head would be on a pole at the outskirts of town.
Well, the king owned all the game.
Exactly.
That was serious. So I think that's another thing. That's why when you usually see pictures of hunting in Europe, it's always pretty well put together people who are dressed pretty nicely. And in the background, you see new Land Rovers, and and Jaguar sedans and stuff. It's because it's not a cheap thing to do. So I think if it's going to be that special, then gosh, they really make it special.
Yeah. Absolutely. And another cool moment, we ended up not killing that many deer. The weather was horrible. It was worse than what it normally is. Typical in that part of Europe is kind of like fall in the Midwest. But we had freezing fog the entire time we were there and visibility of maybe a quarter mile. It was awful. So we are all discussing we didn't get as many deer. And I think it was because when the drivers start their drive and they're flushing these animals, I was overlooking a meadow at one point, and it looked like mice just every which way, but we couldn't shoot into that, and I'll explain that in a second. But they didn't run hurly-burly like they normally do. When the weather's more clear and they get jumped, they'll run a couple of 100 yards. Well, it was so dank and limited visibility. I think what they were doing was they would hop up, run 100 yards, and then stop because they couldn't see anything that was going on. But the basic way this worked was they put all the hunters in a line, typically on a lane, and you could barely see your partner in the fog going all directions. And they said, now on the signal, we can begin the hunt, and you'll hear the beaters off in the distance. And the idea is you're supposed to face outward because the beaters are behind you driving the deer, and you're supposed to face outward. That way you're not shooting at them. And honestly, the first couple of hunts, I had to watch that. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the critters. I wouldn't have shot that way, but it was just cool to see. So I'm all set up behind, and my blind was a tree that was spray painted with a number. That's all it was. Just you stand here. And all of a sudden, the bugle or the French horn or whatever this thing is, the hunt horn, sounded, and it echoed through the rolling hills. And, it sent chills up your spine. And then you hear the beaters, and they got sticks, they're beating, they're playing tin horns, they're shouting, they're singing. And I'm like, wow. And it sounded like a whole bunch of folks. And then suddenly, you start seeing fallow deer and stag and boar and all kinds of stuff just running willy-nilly. The problem was that we faced with this hunt was they tended to kind of just run in the circle instead of like doing this. But I did take one shot at one deer on the second hunt of the day. I was up against the tree and I thought, there's so much going on. I'm going to just face this way like I'm supposed to. And what that does is basically you hear, and then the deer is just hell-bent for election going by you, literally sometimes 10 yards away. So I got a snapshot up and I was tracking the deer and I thought, I've got this one. And just as I pulled the trigger, I killed a tree. So
that's funny.
That's why they call it hunting instead of gathering, so that was my single shot I took.
The beater thing, it brings up another point in that, because of the limited land and whatnot, that's sort of things that Americans don't do. We have pheasant hunting where they place pheasant in the field and then hunt it with a dog, right? But in this situation where everybody has a place to stand, everybody has a direction they're shooting, they pretty much kind of control the way the animals are going. It's just because it's ritualized and it's safer because it's crowded there.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that I noticed in the United States, we don't really have a tradition of tracking.
Yeah.
So, you might follow a deer blood trail if our American eyes can see it, but in Africa, that's very much an integral part of any hunt that you're on because you've got the professional hunter, that you've got you've got somebody who's carrying a backpack or a load or, your equipment, and usually, 3, 4, 5 trackers who are with you. And so it's very ceremonial almost in that, everyone dismounts from their hunting truck and everybody loads up according to the rules and everyone walks off in a certain order. And the PH is the grand poopah, is everybody does whatever he tells them to do. And then after you take a shot, with rare exceptions, everything stops. If the animal goes down, that's fine. But otherwise, now it gets turned over to the trackers. Now they're the boss, and then they go off and do it. And so, it is not the degree of ceremony that you had, because I saw your pictures. It was really interesting. I've seen similar things in some friends of mine went on a hunt in Germany. It was virtually identical. Everyone had load and green on and, and actually that shows another thing, which is, here in America, we hunt rabbits and pheasant and deer and quail and pigs and we hunt all these different game animals. We go prairie dog hunting. We do so we have 8 or 10 different firearms to cover all these different things. Well, over there, that's one of the reasons why everybody owns like one gun.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like, I know they look at Americans and go, why do you need so many guns?
I heard the exact question, and it wasn't a challenge. It was just they're trying to understand even what it's like to be able to own that. They were talking about Czech Republic has actually fairly liberal firearms laws, but it would be on par with California maybe, or actually maybe a little more restrictive. And, they were talking about there may be some new rules. If you buy more than like one gun in 6 months, you have to, explain yourself and go through a psychological exam. And I'm like, that I know guys that have done that couple of times a week, you know?
Yeah.
So it was interesting just because they don't have a Second Amendment. They don't have really a firearms tradition at all. And the other thing to remember on top of all this is the Czech Republic, it was only 1989 when they kicked the commies out. So they went from feudalism to Nazis, and then to communism. So this whole idea of people owning guns was kind of a new concept. So they're working their way through it, but they have a very strong affinity to firearms. But back to the ceremony part of it, once the game is down, and we all got together in the evening, that comes part two. And this was really cool with the deer. They put them all out in the center of this rectangle, and each animal has a bough of spruce on it. And they go the same kind of ritual, but then they call all the successful hunters in, and you get to take the sprig from on top of your animal, and as many as were shot, everybody's kind of like, yeah, that one's mine, whatever. They all look the same. And you dip it in a bit of the animal's blood, and then you get to wear it in your hat. And then they'd say a few more words and play a little more bugle, and, that's it. But again, just that whole treating of the experience as something that's significant. And I did ask one of the Czech guys, said, so what did he say there at the end? And he said, that's just our way of addressing our reverence and thanks for the animal and thanks for the opportunity of doing this and hoping we get to do it again. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool.
Because remember, they don't have a right to hunt.
Exactly.
Really don't. I know in Germany they put a bough in their mouth.
Yeah,
that signifies it's their last meal.
Yeah,
basically that they're doing. And I know Americans. I'm sure there's a lot of Americans that may be listening to this and saying, "Well, that's stupid. Why would you do that?" And
yeah.
And I know since my experience hunting with people like this, because again, when you hunt in Africa, you have to remember, often in your camp there are Europeans.
Right.
So you may have a German or a Czech or a Spaniard or, somebody from the Middle East. And it kind of rubs off on you a little bit. If they're not idiots, which most of them aren't, they're gentlemen and ladies, and they're there and they dress well, and they behave and they do what the PH says, and they usually have very nice guns. And you kind of understand it. It really becomes an integral part of the enjoyment of hunting. And so, you and I have both been in hunting camps where everybody leaves in the morning, they blast away, they drag a bunch of deer back, start drinking Budweiser, and some people may say it's corny, but I think that to have that respect and reverence is appropriate. It's like, Indians used to, they had a lot of respect and reverence for game. And,
yep.
And so even now, if I take a deer or something like that, I'm always very careful to shoot it right. Once you shoot, I don't chase it. You let it die peacefully if it has to, or if you find it, you put it down quickly. And then we always stop for a minute and kind of look at it, and Susie will reach down, kind of pet its head sometimes.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're respectful when we skin it. We're respectful when we, butcher it. And we generally will have a toast and thank you, dear.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, there is a lot of that in the U.S. The guys I like to hunt with are those kind of guys.
Yeah.
And I'm getting ready to go to a hunting camp at the end of the week. I'm hoping it'll be the same kind of thing. I think the difference is here in the U.S., you have such a range of folks. I was sitting there when you were talking about how you handle a down deer, and I'm the same way. And clear down to, I'll typically get a cigar and get my flask and toast the deer and all that. But I've got buddies don't hesitate to put a cigar in its mouth, put some sunglasses on it, and I
know
that's just it's uncool if nothing else. Act like you've been there before, okay? And you had to kill a mammal, a fairly high order mammal. Show some respect. So. I don't get all preachy about it, but after seeing the way they do it in Europe and how they handle it, and they have as good a time or maybe more than we do because it really does make the experience, I guess, more thoughtful. You think about, why are we doing this? Why are we having this ceremony? And what does it mean in the grand scheme of things? And it makes you think.
Well, it is. It's hundreds of years in society like that. I mean, after we're done here, I can get my .22 rifle, go out on my property and go hunting if I want to.
Yeah.
Well, that almost doesn't exist,
Exactly.
I mean, if you're Sam and Susie homemaker, you more than likely don't have any guns. But if you do, you have to be a member of a club. Chances are good your guns are kept at the club.
Mm-hmm.
You have to prove competence with it. And if you want to go rabbit hunting, well, then that's something you have to set up,
Yep.
And so we really are spoiled. And I think a lot of people, when they hunt here in the States, they don't take that half pause breath,
Yeah.
And just think, gosh, we really are lucky,
Yeah.
I have one more thing. I showed up in a deer camp one time, and I had a Loden coat with a vest and a tie,
Yeah.
right? And I thought I'd been back to my first trip in Africa, and that was going on a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And especially in the evening. And so I showed up like that. And of course, it was really funny because there was a lot of kidding and joking and who do you think you are and stuff like that. But actually, everyone eventually was saying, actually, that's really cool. I really like where'd you get that jacket again?
Yeah.
And it was, I could tell that there were some guys there, had they had that, they would have done it too.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It's fun.
It's funny you say that because I've been looking. I think that look,
you can't help it.
It's basically a 3-piece suit with the tie with the pheasants and
knickers,
and your boots and
mud boots,
your wellies.
Yeah, your wellies.
Yep. So that's pretty cool.
And your deer stalker cap, although they also wear the we used to wear them in the 20s and 30s here, those kind of
the fedora hats. Looking kind of things.
Oh, yeah, fedora. But they'd see other ones with a brim, It's like I think they used to, newsboys used to wear them all the time.
We call them go to hell hats.
Yeah, go to hell hats. But they also have kind of those. Oh, they're like much nicer. They're made in Ireland.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all wool, herringbone. And,
yeah. I think I challenge you guys out there is that the next time you go on a hunt is... I know it's going to sound weird, but, dress a little bit nicer, even maybe put a tie on, even if it's just you, because I promise you're going to feel different.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to stand up a little straighter. You're going to be a little more polite. It just happens, and try it and you'll see what I mean.
Exactly. And I was going to close this this is not my first trip abroad. I've been blessed to do some traveling, but I'll tell you what was different about this, and this does tie into hunting, but it ties into really the bigger picture here, and that is appreciating what we have as Americans. Like I said, over there, all the old folks, my age and maybe a little bit younger, grew up under communism. And they remember what it's like because we had a lot of discussion. They were very interested in our presidential election because their biggest fear is, not to get into geopolitics, but if we cut back in our support of Ukraine, if Ukraine falls, Putin's not just going to go, okay, great, that's fine, I'm going to stop there. They're worried that the T-72s may roll right through Prague. And if you look at history over the last, several thousand years, that's not an unfounded fear. So listening to them talk about how much they appreciate how capitalism has made their country a pretty nice place. It was much nicer than even I thought it was going to be. Very modern, very clean. The roads are fantastic. And then it translates into the game. So I come back with a new appreciation for, yes, we've got some craziness going on in the United States politically and just life in general, but we've got it really, really good here. I appreciate after seeing what it could be, and then that, like I said, it carries over into appreciating that I can go hunting. There's public land. I know private landowners. The fact that we can do that, and we have a Second Amendment that gives us a right to own guns is something that the rest of the world looks at, and they don't quite understand it, and they sure do envy it. So off my soapbox, but that was my big takeaway from spending a week in Central Europe.
I would say what Brent said. I mean, seriously. And I think American hunters, I'll include them as it, but a lot of the people that play naysayer about the United States have never been overseas. They've never seen the slums somewhere. They've never seen. Did you see any of the big communist apartment blocks?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure gulags. They've got those concrete. They're all over the communist world. They like those concrete posts that they put barbed wire on, and windowless buildings that.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. I mean, I was there 20 years ago, and people were still a little gun shy.
Exactly.
I mean, it was like before they would talk to you, they'd like look around.
Yeah.
It was force of habit kind of. So,
well, that's what they talked about. That I had one conversation with an older guy, and he talked about, if you said the wrong thing, you and your family might just disappear in the middle of the night.
True.
And disappear usually didn't mean it ended well. So,
that's right.
It's one thing to hear these stories or read it in a news report, to actually stand there and talk to these folks that are actually worried that may come back. It makes you appreciate the freedoms we do have.
I agree. This makes me think too about we both get the outdoor wire and the hunting wire and whatnot online, and on a pretty regular basis, I see press releases from the Montana Department of Fish and Game is inquiring about information for a 4 elk kill,
right?
Where they let the elk they shot them and left them,
yeah,
right. And then it happens really regularly, and we see them all the time in the wire, and that doesn't account for how often it happens, and it's not reported like that. So, I don't ever hear about that in Europe.
No.
And it like doesn't exist, I think. And so we need to clean our act up in that regards over here.
Yep.
So, anyway, I recommend it. Go to Africa, go to Europe if you can, go to South America, go dove hunting in South America, get a taste of what it's like to be overseas, meet the people, learn what they're talking about, learn what they're thinking and worried about, and then come back here and be thankful.
What he said. So. Yeah. Well, great talking to you, Roy. I was on that 9-hour flight back and thinking about all this and what it all means in the greater scheme. So appreciate you taking time to talk. And these kind of talks I like having because we're on the same wavelength. And, I just hope that in the end, guys realize don't just be a legal hunter, be an ethical and a responsible hunter. So thanks for talking to us, Roy.
You bet. It was a lot of fun.
I love to hunt. I love to travel. And when you put the two together, it makes for an incredible experience. As I said, this trip really opened my eyes and made me appreciate what we do have here in the United States. Before we go, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. The holidays are coming up. So if you're looking for a great gift for the shooter in your life, that would be one of our new books. The Odd Angry Shot by John Connor just came out, and we've got Roy's Insider collection of his columns. We've also got a book about Mike Venturino. We've got Smith & Wesson collected articles and a bunch of other great stuff. You can find those either through Amazon or at fmgpubs.com. Also, don't forget to check out our great magazines and their websites. Of course, Guns Magazine at gunsmagazine.com, American Handgunner at americanhandgunner.com, and americancop.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody who works so hard at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you yet again, now get out there and get shooting.